Torah is not monolithic.
What does that mean?
Torah doesn't have just one answer.
Right.
Okay? And that throws a lot of people off. The reason it throws a lot of people off is because they expect God to sort of say, here's the answer.
Right.
This is the right thing to do this. This is the wrong thing to do, don't do that. And the fact is when you see machlokas, you see different ideas, you see back and forth discussion or whatever, people get thrown off. Why didn't God just give you the answer? So I've tried to show you from various sources and discussions this whole issue where it seems within Torah that God did not want to give you a plain cut answer. Now, from the things we were talking about just before, the fact is people still speak to you in terms of presenting things as pretty black and white. That's the way people talk.
Right.
That's the way a lot of Rabbanim talk, because they're concerned. Gotta give answers, whatever. But the fact is that when you hear people talk in terms of black and white, if you go back to the sources seem to be much more not black and white. And that's a dilemma, in the sense that, everyone, you hear people talking black and white, and it seems to be, here's definite answers, and you go back to the sources, and it seems to be it's all different viewpoints and stuff like that, and the question that exists in terms of, well, how do I make heads and tails out of this? On one hand, these people are telling me black and white answers, on the other hand, the sources aren't clear. And how do they get these black and white answers from these sources? And what I've tried to show you or discuss with you is the fact that really the sources have certain principles. It's not everything's up for grabs or whatever, but the sources are presenting different principles or different ideas, and then we're supposed to cull thoughts from these sources, and the reality is given our own individuality and our own thought processes, we all have different conclusions. Right. And that exactly is the intent of the Torah, to allow you to think and pull out the answers within certain parameters. Then we have to discuss what are those parameters, and how open are the discussions, and what do you do with people who are gedolim, and then look at different viewpoints and arguments, and recognize that the opinion of someone who's more scholarly has more weight than this opinion, but it doesn't take away from questions that may exist and so forth. So this is what I've been trying to get across, right? The fact is that Judaism is a tremendous amount of ideas that calls upon you to think and to come up with certain conclusions, but then the question is, how do you arrive at those conclusions or parameters and so forth? And that's a difficult challenge. We touched upon it like conservative, or when we say something's conservative reform, really what we're saying is that those are outside the parameters that we believe exist from a halachic viewpoint. Right. But then even when you have within halacha, you have a variety of opinions. How do you make decisions within the halacha and so forth? These are all things we have to further investigate. But there's a case that's happening now in Eretz Yisrael, which I think gives a good example of what the Torah is calling upon us to do in terms of thinking about something. It's not enough to just, the issue is not just coming up with the answer. The answer may be extremely difficult. The issue is to perceive the complexity of the situation and to deal with it and deal with the challenges of it. So there's a whole aspect over here is that you have to come up with a solution. That's the halacha. You have to come halacha l'maisa. You got to come up with a solution. But there's a difference when the solution arises from the fact that you've actually struggled with the issue. And there's something about the way the Torah is working that says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to understand the struggle of the issues. And the call of Torah is to expand out and see the variety of issues, even to the point that if you're pretty adamant about a certain conclusion, for you to try and see the other side, to try and see how complex the situation is, even if you're more adamant about the conclusion. So there's a situation now in Eretz Yisrael which I think is a good example of demonstrating this complexity. Okay? And how we as Jews are really called upon to actually deal with this, to actually see the complexity. And that is an issue of how to relate to the Arab population in Eretz Yisrael. There are calls in Eretz Yisrael to no longer hire Arabs as workers. Okay, I think the Mayor of Ashkelon made that statement. There are calls against it that basically point out that that's inappropriate. That would be racist. The shul in Har Nof, where that tragedy happened last week, had an Arab worker in it. The shul basically, and almost I think unanimously, I mean it was a very adamant statement by the shul, they were maintaining their Arab worker. I think he was a janitor in the shul. They were maintaining that Arab worker. Under no condition would they let him go. Fact is that you read stories about this Arab worker, when he was told about what happened, he fainted. And he says, and the story goes is that he knows everyone who davens in the shul, okay, and he wants to go to the hospital to visit the people who were hurt, but he's embarrassed to go because he's embarrassed. He's embarrassed about what happened. So the point is that you have this dilemma. So on one hand, you have the dilemma of saying, hey, we're concerned and we don't know how we can trust anyone, because one of the problems is that one of the Arab terrorists was someone who worked in a grocery store in Har Nof. So the point is offering them jobs and trying to integrate them in the community may not work. Then comes the issue, were they next to him in the grocery store? And maybe they weren't, and therefore that fed his hatred. Maybe they were, and it still didn't take away from his hatred. There's a whole variety of situations. There's a variety of dealing with individuals and being able to distinguish individuals from a grouping based upon some grouping out there.
But sometimes you could be like friends with an Arab for like 30 years, and after that he still like would want to kill you. That happens.
Yeah, the truth is
like, he could be your good friend.
Right.
But
on the other hand, and the fact is that Rahman al-Islam, in what happened in Nazi Germany, and when Germans came, they talk about the fact that one of the things that was so hard for Jews was that when the Germans came to get them, it was their neighbors who they were neighbors with for years, who basically just turned away or didn't say anything, or basically pointed out who the Jews were and so forth. So the truth is, our history has been that you can't. No, that's the problem. The problem is that there is arguments both ways. The fact is that on one hand you see individuals who you think are like, how do you tell who's the one who is really going to be a caring human being, and who's the one who's not going to be a caring human being? And general principles are not available. You think the guy's going to be a good guy, and it turns out he wasn't. On the other hand, you see someone who you'd think wasn't going to be so great, but when it came down to push comes to shove, and a lot of stories, and there were stories about righteous Gentiles during the war that they never stood out. But the fact was, when it came down to push came to shove, they said, listen, there's right and wrong, and you have to do what's right. So the point is this is a dilemma that is really going back and forth in Eretz Yisrael nowadays. There's actually a website, not a website, a site on Facebook that I saw that calls himself Orthodox Jews Against Racism and Discrimination.
Oh, that rabbi, yeah.
Yeah.
He's a young guy, I met him. He's very left.
No, this is not from a leftist. I don't think it's from a leftist.
Rabbi Yankee.
No, this guy's Yosef I think it's Yosef Bechover who's a rabbi behind it. But it's not leftist. This is someone he's also a Talmid Chacham or whatever. The fact is that it's not a leftist thing. There's a lot of people who are very concerned about what really is the halacha.
Right.
In other words, can you simply categorize a group so simply, and can you can you just categorize a group simply, or do you have to, or do you have to deal with it individually? And it's a very tough case. I mean, the fact is that I was told there was everyone was pointing out to that people pointed out, well, there was a Jew who also killed in a mosque, right? Baruch Goldstein, he also went in and killed people in a mosque, right? So people were saying that, and the response to the Wall Street Journal is, let's understand the difference over here. When this thing happened, they were handing out candy in Gaza, and they were celebrating in the streets of East Jerusalem. With Baruch Goldstein, what was generally the response of the Israeli community across the board, from Haredim across the board? Okay, generally it was absolute anger. It was disgust. It was now. He says, are there a few Jews who still think highly of Baruch Goldstein? Yes, but they're very much in the minority. Right. The fact is, the point is how can you make any comparison? So, and people are pointing out like this and say, listen, so therefore it's incumbent upon Jews not to have blanket, all Arabs are bad, because that's the way people talked about Jews. All Jews are bad. Right. Okay, so the fact is that we have, on the other hand, what do you do to protect yourselves? And this is becoming an issue. So the reason I'm bringing this up is that you see this kind of issue that exists, and in terms of people trying to bring sources from halacha of how you deal with these things. And it's really a very hard issue. And the fact is, what's unique about this is that, when I talk about this in terms of this site, is you talk about people talking about this within Orthodoxy, they're actually trying to bring halachic sources, and this is exactly what we're called upon to do, to actually try and see, gee, this is a really complex issue. And in certain ways, that's what really is unbelievably distinguishing from a frum perspective. If you look at more black and white, if you look in terms of religions in general, the more right-wing you are, the more black and white you are. So fundamentalists, like fundamentalist Muslims, they're the fanatics, right? And therefore ISIS is everything's black and white. Okay? If you're an infidel, you're an infidel. If you're an infidel, you deserve to be beheaded. So people look at this guy. This last person was beheaded. He's a really nice guy. He actually converted to Islam. He was no, black and white. He's from America. Kill him, right? Behead him. He's bad. Because that's what goes with usually people who take very strong religious perspectives. Because their perception of the deity is the deity has all the answers. It's black and white, and therefore the deity is going to say this or that. So you look in terms of right-wing religious communities, it's generally right. The answer is pretty black and white. These people are good, these people are bad, this is good, this is bad, so forth and so forth. But what you're really seeing from this issue in terms of Eretz Yisrael right. is the call from halacha is to see the complexity of it and the issues that are developing out of this right. and the questions that really come out of it.
What about taking a stand though?
In what way?
I know obviously not all issues are black and white, but let's say you have to take a stand. Like
okay.
they want to pass a bill in Knesset right now.
That's psak. That's psak. Now the truth is, I'm not just talking. The truth is, not every position that's presented in Eretz Yisrael is going to be a halachic position. So the truth is, we're talking about halachic positions. Not every. In other words, there's a certain thing that you see among Jews when they say, two Jews, three opinions. Yeah. That's an aspect of the way Jews think, that they push their heads right. to see things, to try. They really work in many ways, contrary to dogmatism, to see the different perspectives. But what exists in a certain Jewish way is the idea of really trying to see different perspectives.
Right.
That's really comes from halacha. In the end, though, once you see the entire spectrum of opinion, you got to have a psak. You can sit there and say there are 40 different opinions on this, but then, like if you see someone really go through a whole back and forth on kashrus, so there's this sheet, there's that sheet, there's this argument, there's that argument, and so forth, but in the end, you have to say whether it's kosher or not.
Right.
But there's a difference between someone saying something's kosher or not because he's black and white and doesn't know anything else, or it's a real big issue, and then you come to the difference. And the fact is, and sometimes that's much more difficult to do, because even if you're going to come down to a psak, that's not universal, but you got to come down to a psak. But the point is that's what Torah really forces you, and that's the difference in this situation, is that you're going back and forth. Now, the truth is, I thought about this. It's a very interesting issue because it really affects a yesod of being Jewish, in the sense that we're called B'nai Rachamim, we're called merciful people. So the point is that when we're put into the situation we are in Eretz Yisrael, we are really being asked to act contrary to our basic our basic being, right? In the sense that a guy who's like tough, right? So become tough. Okay, fine. So, but if you're basically a person who's generally a caring and sensitive person and see the dilemma and the issues and feel bad and so forth, the call to be tough is much more difficult because it's contrary to your personality. And Jews are b'nei rachamim, and the problem is that what's happening in Eretz Yisrael, in many ways, we're being forced into situations which go contrary to what our natural inclination is. The natural inclination is to try and be tolerant. The natural inclination is to try and be welcoming, try and be opening. And the fact is that we are concerned that we will not take, that we don't want to take that strict, that harsher viewpoint, right? And we don't. And the fact is, it's very hard for us to do this. And the truth is, though,
see how the problem Abraham had when he had to banish Ishmael and Hagar. We can see the same similarity.
Well, the truth is, but he had problems, but then he banished them. And the fact is, people ask how he could do that, and so on. But the fact is you're right. The fact is, he didn't want to do that, and he was having a hard time with it. It's very hard to do those type of things. And the fact is I was thinking about this in terms of Shaul HaMelech. Shaul HaMelech lost the Melucha. There's no doubt. He lost the Melucha. He was punished for that. Okay? There's a lot of things, but still the Gemara says that Shaul HaMelech is supposed to be recognized as a Bachar, but he's chosen of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Shaul HaMelech is still considered to be a tzaddik, and we speak about Shaul HaMelech with still tremendous respect and recognition of his position as one of the tzaddikim of history. Okay, and you look at it and say, but what are you talking about? He lost the Melucha. He did a punishment. It was so bad. He was punished. But that didn't take away from his stance of still being considered one of the greats of Klal Yisrael. And the truth is, if you look at his punishment, you look at his sin, they say that he gave chesed when chesed was not appropriate. But that's the challenge of being Jewish. That's really it. It's
not a black and white system, but if you make a wrong mistake,
it's almost like, but his mistake came out of something that was part of his inherent being as a yid, because we're b'nei rachamim. So the point is that, and that's a real tough situation. And the point is that, but what I'm trying to point out is, you see in Eretz Yisrael that even as they're going through this whole tremendous thing, and everyone was terribly affected by what happened in Har Nof last week. Everyone it just shattered everyone. But at the same point in time, we're now going back and forth of what to do. Can we just totally write off a whole population? What about tolerance? What about this? What about punishing individuals who aren't deserving punishment because of other individuals? These kind of questions are all questions that emerge from the people who are really analyzing things.
Right.
Now, do they make the answer much more difficult? Yes. But that's the natural consequence of being Jewish. That's that's exactly what comes about. That our whole process of education is pushing the envelope, trying to see things, and then it's complicated. And then what happens is when you hear people who are trying to give answers that seem to take away from that complication, it confuses people. Right? I'm learning in the Gemara that there's this sheet and that sheet and so forth and so forth. I'm learning how complex this situation is. And yet I talk to a rabbi and he gives me an answer in black and white terms. As if it's nice and simple. So then people look at it and say, what exactly is this system? If it's black and white, so why does it just look it up from God? And that's what God said, black and white.
So if every Shiur is supposed to take like an hour at least of research to really paskin, how do you live? Like, oh, should I or is this straight versus not true? Should I wash my hands? Do I do it again? Do I every single thing is takes.
Yeah.
How do you?
Yeah.
What's the practicality in that?
Yeah. Yeah. Read the Hadama of Mishnah Berurah, Hadama Mishnah Berurah of Hilchos Shabbos. Basically tells people you really have to go learn Shabbos. You really have to learn it, because otherwise you can't get out of bed on Shabbos because you don't know if you're going to do anything. If anything you're going to do is going to be wrong or right. The fact of the matter is that that's why people wrote codes. That's why people wrote Kitzur Shulchan Aruchs or the Rambam.
Isn't that a flaw? Isn't that also like
what was the original? Every time there was a code written, okay, when the Rambam wrote his code, the Rabbi hit the roof. Okay, the Rabbi said you can't say a code because people have to have the thoughts, the reason behind it. When the Shulchan Aruch wrote the code, do this, do that, do this. Big people, the Marshal, the Maral, said you can't do that. People have to know the concepts behind it, and people have to make decisions, because you can't have a code that can tell you what to do in every situation. The Ramban writes that by Fesita Yashav V'Atov. You have to know what the underlying concepts are in order to know how to act in situations that are not so clear-cut, given,
so
black and white.
Because our whole generation right now seems relying on Shulchan Aruch and
the fact of the matter is that you rely upon it. The truth is you do rely upon it, because Mishnah Berurah is a place to look up for fast halacha and so forth. But the truth is that the ideal is, and there's also a question of what the psak is for our generation, given the parameters of psak and so forth and so forth. Mishnah Berurah has been accepted as a sort of posek achrot, although not universally. The other people basically say, really, you should know the Aruch HaShulchan or whatever. But the fact is that it's best if people learn through the concepts. You can't learn through the concepts. You have to know a code, or you have to rebut that you can ask questions about. And the fact is, you have to do the best you can. But the big difference is like this. You're right. The fact is that you may not know exactly what to do in certain situations, and maybe it's worthwhile to learn codes. Most people say, listen, you gotta learn a psak halacha to know what to do, especially since even while you're learning. So when I was in yeshiva, you still learn the Mishnah Berurah, because you're not going to know everything to do, so you have to know certain behavior. But the difference is to understand that these statements of the psak halacha is a result of this analysis, and this is a psak halacha that you can rely upon. But the bottom line is the key is to understand that it's the result of this analysis.
But shouldn't there be other Shulchan Aruch then, like a counter Shulchan Aruch that?
No, the fact of the matter is that what do you think you have when you read the Meforshim from the Shulchan Aruch?
Right.
You have people.
No, it's just explanation or just the idea of understanding the mechanics of it.
No, they disagree. This is his argument. He's arguing like this, and really should be an argument like that.
They argue with the Ramban? Or I mean with the Rama?
Yeah. Shachantal is arguing with the Rama.
So how do...
Then you have to know how you paskin in those situations.
Oh boy.
The fact is that, listen, if you look up the Mishnah Berurah and you say, listen, this is what the Mishnah Berurah says to do, I'm going to do it, fine.
Right.
Okay. And if you have another person that says, listen, I look it up in the Aruch HaShulchan, the Aruch HaShulchan says do this, that's what I'm going to do. Okay, fine. As long as you're consistent and you're not trying to play games and you're trying to do what's right.
Right.
But there's a difference between understanding that this statement is the result of this whole analysis.
So why do we have to follow the statement then?
What?
Why do we have to follow the statement?
Because you have to know what to do.
But let's say
If you're on a level that you've analyzed certain things. Remember, my Rabbi once said to me, he said, listen, can I argue with Ramosha? Yeah. I can argue with Ramosha. If I spend, few months looking up his psak, going through all the Meforshim, so forth and so forth, yeah, I can learn enough that maybe I can come to a conclusion connected with Ramosha.
right.
Okay, but I have to spend months to learn this one area, because Ramosha's mind was such that he was able to do it in a short amount of time.
Right.
I mean, the fact is that that makes a big difference.
Well, also people are scared to do that because they'll say like, oh, who am I?
Right, that's also
You
part
don't
of
really
it.
know the machshavas.
The fact is that's all part of it. The difference is like this: is that if you understand that even that's exactly it. If you understand that you have to do it to the extent that you can, because that's what Judaism's about. Now the truth is that there are people who are able to know these things and so forth and so forth. Listen, there are times where you're called upon the paskin, and there's situations where you rely upon the minority opinion over the majority opinion because you think that's right and so forth and so forth. You understand that who are you to think what's right when all these other people are saying this?
Right.
But the point is that you understand the complexity, but you also understand that you don't know the whole corpus of information. So the point is you do the best you can.
So how can you criticize?
In what way?
I don't know. Some Rebbeim criticize like you'll have
Because it's a matter of discussion. Criticizing implying that you're putting down, but the matter is it's really a matter of discussion. It's a matter of checking with these ideas.
like people will say in the Shiur world. Like I had a Rabbi show me nameless. Well, he'd probably publicly admit it. Had certain Rebbeim weren't as great. Like he, for some reason, knows who was a greater like Talmud Chacham than the other, and he'll say like the Dati Lumi crowd is not as great learning.
Yeah, so fine. So people have this idea to support their viewpoint. Okay, and the fact is that
that's not the side.
No, and the truth is do people take on viewpoints to support their perspectives, what they want their perspectives to be? Yes. But the key point is to understand that that the world of Torah is that type of world, and we're called upon to have to make decisions within the complexity of the whole situation, including the fact that there are people wiser than us and so on and so forth. But it's a big difference. That's why I wanted to point this thing with Eretz Yisrael out.
Right. So
here's a real issue, and it's a political issue, and it's an issue, but it's an issue in terms of ethics. It's an issue in terms of what should be the position of a firm Jew, in terms of relating to non-Jews and so forth. And do you look at the grouping? Do you look at individuals? How do you deal with it? How do you evaluate? It's a tough situation, and people are struggling with it. But the fact is that the people who came to the forefront to raise it, they understand this. I think they understand that this is part of what we're called upon to do.
So here's a question, right? So let's say even with Eretz Yisrael or whatever, or when the Gedolim, the so-called Gedolim, whoever they are, whoever considers what is a Gadol, get together and make a psak for the door, like they'll get together on its internet or something. When do you, like, say the chain of command has been broken. We don't have, so who dictates us what the halacha of the door should be?
The fact is that the idea is what you're saying. Is there a uniform system of psak? There isn't. The point is that you're assuming that there's some kind of system of a system that will come up with the black and white answer. We don't have that. We did have it when we had a Sanhedrin.
Because it was universally accepted?
Right, because the Sanhedrin was the authority that gave the black and white answer. But before they gave a black and white answer, the complexity of the situation was known. It didn't get to the Sanhedrin until it went through a whole myriad of Beit Dinim, and it came to clear cut that Beit Dinim were arguing with each other. Okay, it didn't get to the Sanhedrin. It wasn't that, let's go call the Sanhedrin. It only went to the Sanhedrin when it went through all the other Beit Dinim. Okay?
Right.
And then they say, hey, there's still a machlokas and we're not sure what to do, and there's this one like this and it's like this. So then it came to the Sanhedrin. And then the answer to the Sanhedrin was basically we need a psak, so we have to know what to do.
But was that binding?
That was binding for the generation. But the next Sanhedrin, when it came to psak, not in terms of legislation.
They wouldn't say kosher treif. They would say like.
They would say kosher treif.
Oh, they would say kosher treif?
Yeah, that's a psak.
But even then, how did the Sanhedrin?
The way the Gemara works, it argues and goes through a series of back and forth.
It
comes up with
came
a
to
certain conclusion.
But how do you,
it doesn't really come up totally with that conclusion always.
Right.
But the Sanhedrin,
but a lot of
most
of the time,
the Sanhedrin will come out and say, okay, this is kosher, this is treif. But the point is that in psak,
right.
It's a fascinating thing. We talk about the need for bezdin gadol b'chacham minyan, a greater bezdin, right? That's only for legislation. That's when they made new rabbinic rules. But when they're talking psak, right, of what the halacha is in a judicial sense, not they're legislating, but they're trying to make a decision based upon the existing concepts. Then the Sanhedrin makes this decision, and then a subsequent Sanhedrin has to make its own decision.
So potentially speaking, can a new Sanhedrin come around and say those greater knowledge, whatever that means, and completely rearrange everything?
No, because you don't know, because you're not working with the distinction between legislation and judicial.
We had the
you have to make that decision.
and then the Bavli Gemaras.
Right.
Each kind of had differences.
Right.
In their.
Right.
It's kind of similar in what you're saying.
Right. The fact is we live with, and then there's ideas where certain approaches were taken and accepted by Klal Yisrael, so that has a standing. But we're not working. What?
How does Sanhedrin make a psak to begin with? When they're like, how can we say that the situation they were dealing with?
Sanhedrin is talking about a specific Sanhedrin, a specific body. It's the same way as saying the Supreme Court of Canada makes a decision.
Right.
Okay. It wasn't some fluid type of there. It was a body who made a decision in a specific place and time and so on and so forth, saying this is our judicial decision, the same way as the Supreme Court of Canada does.
Right.
It's not
which can be overridden if they find it doesn't suit the needs of the people.
No, how can it be overridden?
You never see these things.
No, you can have the Supreme Court of Canada a subsequent making a decision contrary to the previous one, then they have to deal with the question of precedence.
Because they make it like, okay, wow.
We're talking about judicial ideas, but the fact is that Sanhedrin.
Pasakum, I don't know.
Pasakum is legislation.
Right.
But you have to understand the difference between legislated law, okay, and thing. But we're not talking with the Sanhedrin. We don't have a Sanhedrin today. There's a reason why we follow the Shulchan Aruch, and the question is because it would seem to be generally accepted by Klal Yisrael to follow the parameters of the Shulchan Aruch. But the parameters of the Shulchan Aruch doesn't mean you're following the psak of the Ramah and the Beis Yosef. It means you're working within the parameters of this discussion, which basically means that certain Rishonim are no longer part of the discussion in terms of psak.
So can you say that so easily? Like, because I remember I was in yeshiva and there was a guy there who now is off the derech, but there were some very interesting Rishonim that say some very challenging things.
Yes. So the question is,
and they're Rishonim.
Yes. But the fact is, the majority of Rishonim disagreed.
But does that disqualify them?
In terms of psak, one of the major considerations of psak is the majority is the number, and also the standing. Yes, you had Rishonim who may have said a certain thing, but the fact is,
who said something, and then
but that Tana made that, but all the other Tanaim disagreed with him, right? So who is it? There was a Tana like Rabbi Eliezer on Shabbos said that you can't have that for Mila there's certain very restrictive rules of how Mila is Deicha Shabbos, right? Rabbi Eliezer of Mila had wider rules for Septim. The Psak Halacha didn't follow Rabbi Eliezer, so nowadays you can't take the wide parameters that he had of how you can be Derech Shabbos for Mila.
So in theory, the way I'm thinking about it, correct me if I'm wrong, you know how you have like a round robin effect?
Yeah.
Where you have like this opinion and then it gets cancelled to get smaller and smaller?
Right.
So does that happen with halacha to this day, or?
Yeah. Yeah.
So in truth, it is becoming more black and white.
Well, it's becoming more limited. The truth of the matter is there were opinions that were accepted in the past that are no longer in the discussion of psak. But we still have those opinions to understand the ideas.
So let's say you want it.
So the fact is, no, we don't pass like Beis Shammai, but you still learn Beis Shammai,
right?
Because Beis Shammai opens up your ideas,
right?
Okay, so there's the idea of trying to see the ideas, and then psak comes up with a certain conclusion.
So what about? Okay, here's another case, right? So we don't have a bedstein. Whatever a gadol is whatever.
So we don't have a sanhedrin.
But we also have an idea of like we still have Masorah somehow. We still have
because we have Masorah.
Where the location you live can affect you. Different minhagim of different places. Why are you bound by that? Why are you bound by Masorah? Why are you bound?
Because you're talking about the whole rules of how you take this body of information.
Right.
This massive body of information, which on one hand you are expanding to try and see every possible viewpoint and so forth and so forth, and then you're working with certain rules of how you're going to come down to a conclusion because you need to have a conclusion.
Right.
See, the tension between the need to have a conclusion and seeing the spectrum of ideas, that's a tension that a lot of people can't deal with.
It doesn't. It's like a paradox.
Yes, it's very much like it's like you're opening up every possibility,
but then limiting it.
And then you have to come to a conclusion. It's a lot easier if a person said, listen, I don't trust any Arabs. 100% they can't be trusted. Then you know what to do.
Yeah.
But in saying that, you have to negate reality. You have to negate any possibility. The minute you start seeing how unbelievably broad the possibilities are, and the arguments this way, and the arguments that way, and this issue and this issue, then the conclusion becomes much more difficult. But that's what psak is about. Yeah. And then one of the things is the rules that you're supposed to apply in psak. And that's a challenge. But I wanted to point out this case in Israel because I think it's something you can understand the dilemma.
Right.
And it's all over the internet nowadays, where people are presenting both sides of the story, same point in time, and people are not sure what to do.
Also,
and everyone knows what?
Israel's interesting because there's secular.
Yeah, it's more than just halachic Jews, but you see halachic Jews are dealing with it, because you can't just say black and white.
So how do you know who to follow? That's
the next thing. So then you have the person you have a connection with, who becomes your Rav, and you follow his direction.
What happens when you disagree with your Rav?
Then it becomes an issue when you start to get a new Rav, or when the disagreement with the Rav is supposed to put pressure back upon you to maybe reconsider your own thoughts.
Right.
You know, I remember. I mean, that's part of the tension. The fact is, it's a tension. Is that the idea of having a Rav is the idea that the person directs you and sometimes gives you ideas that challenge you and say, oh, I have to see new, and other times they say, listen, at this point in time, I can no longer follow this person as well. And that's a tension. And there's no black and white solution for this. Right? People are always looking, so what do I do in this situation? I still remember this one person. Remember, we had someone over in my sukkah, on sukkahs, right? It was kind of chilly out. So he said, when can we get? So we were talking about at what point in time do you go in because you're chilly, right? So he said, when can I go in? I said, when you're chilly. No. Tell me the temperature, so I can go in. I said, it's up to you when you're chilly.
You can go in the
says, I'm asking you as a rabbi, can you please tell me when I can go in and when it's okay for me to go in? When you're chilly. He says, I don't want to make this decision of whether. I said, well, guess what? God wants you to make the decision. You have to, it's when you're chilly. Okay? Anyways, it's just a challenge over there.
Right.